What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 804. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how was your arena open?
Nice question. I got there pretty quickly on my, I guess it was my third run, and had a good deck, really good deck, and ended up day two drafting an extremely bad deck. It was basically, I went for I went for 5 color, failed, ended up on blue-red, and just was like trying to cheese them out with like +1/+1 and flying and all this other like, very mediocre stuff. But then I ran into an arena bug where it basically disconnected me, and then when I reconnected, I was just at the title screen, and then all of a sudden I just had a loss. Like I reconnected a few times and eventually got to.
God.
Yeah, it was.
I would go nuts.
It was pretty agonizing, to be honest. So that really sucked, and so that eliminated my run because I was 1-1 at the time, and then I basically just got an arena game loss. I will say that the arena support did end up giving me entry into day 2 of the next arena open, which I was like, all right, that's fine. But I was like, I would also like the gems I spent trying to make day 2 of this one, because I spent my weekend playing this. I don't really like getting entry into day 2. Getting entry into day 2 of like one of the arena qualifiers, that's one thing, because that's like a pretty hard thing to make. I'm going to make day 2 of the open pretty much any time if I want to spend enough time. It doesn't really do much for me to get a day 2, spot. That said, there's not much they can do. I understand like their constraints. So I'm not saying that they needed that they kind of had like a bad fix for it. I was just like, I would like a little bit more, and ended up they were willing to refund me and give me a day 2 entry. So yeah, what can you do, right? I
guess that's the best you're going to get. Yeah. I did 3 sealeds as well. I had the first one was awesome red, white, but I don't know. I guess I'm just too bad with those decks to make it, and I fell short. And then I had a bad deck that I didn't do well. But the third one, I had a solid 5 color ish build with 2 bombs, and I was able to get there. But then, I felt like I had a really good deck out of the draft as well, with 3 Dragonstorm Globe and 2 what's it called? Tanir. What is it? The lifelink one.
Teval or whatever.
Teval.
The Sultai one?
The Sultai one, Arbiter of Virtue. Yeah. And then I just lost twice. I mean, I have stories, but they're not that interesting. And so I went 2 and 2.
I wish a lot of people would would go down that road.
Yeah. So I did not, so close. I did not quite end up making it to the second draft, though. I thought I had a good chance after the draft portion. I felt pretty relieved. The last few times day 2 drafts have had bad decks, just mediocre draft decks that I felt like were going to be a uphill climb either way. But this one I thought, okay, I got the tools here, just didn't quite make it. Alas, I was happy just to be playing an arena open. For this episode of the show, we're going to be doing our sunset show for Tarkir Dragonstorm. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about with this set. What a curveball this one was. Totally different, I think, than I thought when I first saw it, and ended up being different even than that. We're going to talk about that today on the show. Before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Thank you very much for your support of the show. We're also supported by Ultimate Guard. They make the best stuff in the business. If you need to protect your cards, your decks, your collection, they are going to have you covered. That means that, if you need sleeves for individual cards, they're going to have it. Deck boxes, long boxes. If you need binders to protect your whole collection, backpacks to move your stuff around, you're going to find it at ultimateguard.com, and you can buy it at your favorite local game store or your favorite online retailer. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. One of the perks you get for being a Patreon supporter of ours is you get access to the Patreon question of the week thread. This one comes from Michael, who says, hey guys, question about drafting in Cube. How much do you consider the idea of cutting a color completely for pack 1, pick 1 when drafting? So say you have a deck where there's no power and the best cards in the pack are like Thoughtseize, Demonic Tutor, and Fury, with nothing else really in that tier, no other particularly good red cards. I would consider both of the black cards to be better than Fury, and my inclination would be to take one of them. Is this a situation where you would take Fury and cut red entirely and try not to fight over black, or do you just take the best card? I imagine the dynamic is also different in team versus pod versus league, where leagues, you just want them off of whatever you're on, but for pod and team, you could potentially hook them and cut them. This has probably been asked and answered in the past, but would love to hear some updated discussion on this. I mostly pod cube, and in this case, I would probably just take Thoughtseize since it goes in everything, and expect to potentially get less black in pack 2. Does that factor in for you, Luis? I know, normally it wouldn't. In cube / any one of these 3 scenarios that Michael laid out, does it?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I think that the answer is different for whether you're in a team draft is very different than whether you're in a league or pod, though I think league and pod are actually the same. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a factor in an individual draft, 8-player draft, that you're passing a DT after taking Thoughtseize. Like, all things being equal, sure, you'd rather the person passing to you is cooperating with you. You want to be in different colors, and all that stuff. But I think that I agree. Thoughtseize is quite a bit better than Fury. I would just not take Fury over Thoughtseize, even if I'm passing DT and Fatal Push and Duress or whatever. Like, there's not really an amount of black cards that would make me go the other direction. That said, in a team draft, it can be pretty nice to take Fury there. The next player is going to take like Thoughtseize, and then the next player takes DT. Except it's like that's actually kind of reversed. So it would end up in a spot where now your teammate is going to get cut. So what you want to do in an ideal world is, if there's 2 good black cards and a good red card, take one of the good black cards, pass the black and the red card, hope they take the black card, and then you cut them. So actually it kind of ends up in the same place. You just take Thoughtseize either way. Mm-hmm. But it is pretty interesting to kind of figure out what the next 2 people are taking. Past that, it's kind of hard to end up in a spot where you really understand what's going on. Like, it's just too hard to predict. But you are able to do that, though.
I think the other thing that's interesting about this question for Michael is that it is cube. And, the packs that we draft on Arena and in sealed booster packs, those are collated. Like, they are set into print runs to prevent certain things from happening, like having a whole bunch of blue cards in one pack and nothing else, that type of stuff. Interestingly, most cube, especially if you're playing in real life, that isn't the case, right? I mean, people are just shuffling a lot, but that isn't the same thing as, sort of laying out what's going to be shuffled ahead of time and then shuffling, right? It's random, but not fully random if you're drafting out of booster packs or online. And, to me, that would lean me further into what Luis said, where, you are going to have packs that have multiple top tier cards of one color more often than you would in a normal draft environment. And that's just going to be part of the equation. So if that's the case, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome that by just cutting a color, because you might just get a pack even 2 packs later that still has 3 great black cards in it. And you're just like, well, okay, I really wanted to cut black, but like, I'm kind of banging my head up against a wall that's not going to let me do it. So I think it returns you to drafting principles once again, which is just to take the best card.
Yeah. And also a cube in particular, it's like, you don't care if they take a blue card after you take a blue card, or because there's so much blue, or like you could both be in the same color but different decks. You care a lot more if you like take Tolarian Academy, but you're passing Tinker, and it's like, that's going to be kind of annoying for the second pack.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's almost less about color and more about the mostly 2 card combos that you see in cube regularly, and trying to cut those. Okay, let's do one last crack-a-pack for Tarkir Dragonstorm before we get into the sunset action. And it looks like we got a pretty decent one here, Luis. Our first card up is Wind-Scarred Crag, which we always seem to open on our crack-a-packs. Then there's Summit Intimidator, which never really found a home. This next card did, though, Dirger Island Dragon. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, when I was playing on Magic Online, one of the things we did was we would look at our most drafted card. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dirger Island Dragon was on my short list. I played that card all the time.
Yeah, well, it's the sweet spot of a good card. You'll always play it, and you take it like in the middle of the pack, and you're pretty happy with it, but not so good that you're never going to see it. Like your most drafted card can almost never be one of the top commons, just because those don't get passed all at such a high rate. So
yeah,
it is pretty interesting to try to figure out like what has the kind of ingredients to be the most drafted common.
Definitely, and I think Dirger Island Dragon does. It's also a great showcase for Omen, which we'll talk about later in the sunset when we talk about the mechanics. But this is, nitpicks aside about Omen's formatting and that type of thing. This is a great case for a card that is serviceable early in the early to mid part of the game. But, if you start finding yourself on turn 5, 6, 7, 8, you're going to kind of save up your mana and start casting dragons with it. And it does both. Plus, the dragon, card type mattered a lot in the set too. So I like that one. Next is Rebellious Strike. I was never really big on Rebellious Strike, though people really cast it against me sometimes. Yeah. Ringing Strike Mastery. Did this cross the threshold into a card that you actually wanted to play?
Well, I can tell you that I had it in my
in your blue-red
in my blue-red deck. So that was great.
Okay. Not so much, huh?
No, I don't think the card is very good. Like it had its moments, and one of the things I wish was like maybe a little better was like the blue-red aggro deck, because that deck really did have
had some tools.
Had some tools to succeed, but I think that overall, like you will cast this card, you'll remove a blocker, but then at some point they're going to spend 5 mana and just basically get to recast their creature of sorts, and then you just end up in a spot where I feel like you're not really happy with that exchange. I had someone at the Spotlight series like bringing Strike Mastery, one of my creatures, and I like took a hit and then at some point just untapped it, and then they just couldn't really attack into it because they didn't really want to trade. So it's a bit like a fireball.
It's a pure tempo play. Yeah. And those, they do have the home in the right archetype. Like Luis was saying, if a really well supported blue-red deck, then that can be the home for it. But in a normal deck, it's not so much. I also found that it was very easy to punish Ringing Strike Mastery. When people played it against me, I'd often just pass the turn back threatening to untap my creature, but I actually had stuff to do with my mana that wasn't untapping the creature, counter spells or card draw spells, stuff like that, where I really felt like, and my opponent had to respect the fact that I could just untap my creature so they weren't able to attack into it. So it didn't really even hurt that bad. It was like the turn they cast it, they got to hit me. That was it. After that, it felt like it had minimal impact. Next is Sarkhan's Resolve. That's the destroy target creature with flying, or a creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. This I never main decked it. I wasn't a fan, but people did. I got nabbed by this thing a few times. I mean, it turns out there was a lot of targets for the removal spell side of this thing with all the dragons flying around.
Yeah, Sarkhan's Resolve ended up actually being pretty good. Like I think that card, it was a card that I ended up always main decking and sealed, and often just playing in my 5-color decks. And
you did play it a lot? Yeah, I just never quite got it to the point where I was main decking it, but I respected it. It was like when it hit one of my cards, I wasn't like, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, that's a thing.
One of the few things in the format that can kill your any, the 10/10 flyer.
Yeah. God, I hate that card. I never opened that thing.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't
run
that
bad. Card in
like
literally day one.
Yeah, I didn't run bad in I had like multiple Ugins. I had tons of great, it wasn't like I felt like I just, wasn't running. It's just that one card for some reason eluded me. And holy crap, I don't think I ever beat that. I might have beaten it once, but next, well, this is going to be a tough one to knock off, at least at the common slot. Caustic Exhale.
Caustic Exhale is a great card. One of the better removal spells. One of the cards that you really want to see in your 5-color deck. So
yeah,
I think that card worked out really nicely.
Yeah, we got the Exhale cycle as our preview cards for this set, and we were just going like, these just seem awesome. We just liked all of them except for actually, did we just like all of them? No, there's one bad one. What's the bad one? Green's great. Red's amazing.
The
Black's
Piercing
really
Exhale
good.
was the worst one
Blue,
for sure.
a white Osseous Exhale. Is that what it was?
Osseous was also not great. I mean,
it was
basically the Grixis ones were incredible, and the non-Grixis ones were,
I don't know, man.
were okay.
You'll wait till you see what the best green common was.
Is it Piercing Exhale?
It was, at least by the numbers. We don't just go by the numbers. We pick the ones that we think. Like I had an Inoc Wayfarer just as a little preview there, but it did perform worse. Underfoot Underdogs, last common.
Card that had some potential, but not really a card you were too excited about playing most of the time, I wouldn't say.
Just worked well with War Effort, and that was about it. Next, Rainveil Rejuvenator. That one actually won an award for me later on. Ended up being horrible, fair enough to say.
One of the disappointments.
Big disappointment. Yeah, that one took me a while to let go of, too, because I'm just like, this thing seems great, and it just, not so much. These cards ended up performing really well. We liked them, and maybe they were even a little better than we thought. Jeskai Monument.
Oh, the monuments are fantastic. They
Very
all played really, really well.
Yeah, they actually ended up being some of the premium fixing in the set because they did something else, and there was so much other fixing that you could kind of be picky and go for this slower but better long game version of fixing rather than just having to focus on the lands, which it kind of felt like we would have to do at the beginning. And I felt like throughout the entire format, my emphasis on picking lands just slowly went down and down and down and down. You played them. I did pick them, but
for sure,
I just didn't feel that pressure that you normally feel in a 5-color format that is just like, you just got to take the land. It was like, there's a lot of other things you can do to help fix your mana.
It just had a lot of fixing, and some might even say too much. And as a result, the lands ended up moving down, I think, quite a bit in our pick orders.
Yeah, definitely. Last uncommon, another disappointment, and another card that I gave an award later. It's Effortless Master. That's the 2 blue-red 4/3 Vigilance Menace, and it gets 2+1/+1 counters.
I'm a little surprised because there were some cards you got wrong in the set review that, like, at the time we said it, I'm like, I think we're probably getting this wrong, but whatever. This was not one of them. This was one of the cards that's like, I looked at it and I'm like, this card is just not going to be good. So I'm a little surprised you were into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of down for evasive stats when it doesn't cost you that much. And I felt like this card was totally fine on the surface for power with menace, vigilance, whatever, is like, that's going to hit hard enough. But this is obviously built to be like a 5-drop that comes down as a 6/5. And I thought, you know what, that's like kind of tough to kill. And like, it hits really hard. Like, why not? And it just, not even close. You're definitely right about that one. We have a triple rare pack here for our last crack pack. Jeff really outdid himself. Our first one is a foil Narset Jeskai Waymaster. That's the 3/4, and at the beginning of your end step, you can discard your hand, and if you do, you draw cards equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn. Card's okay.
The card's got some spice in Modern with repeals and moxes, but the card's okay. It frequently is going to let you just, Tormented Voice, discard your last card to draw 2 cards or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like a 3-color card that if you're, solid Jeskai or like a spell heavy, a lot of cheap cards, 5-color deck, you'd play the card, but I don't think it's a card that you want to take here.
No. I would still be on Caustic Exhale at this point. Over Jeskai Monument. Our next rare, how times have changed, is Temur Battlecrier. That's the cost Temur mana, and it's a 4/3. And then it says, during your turn, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. A random smattering of cares about power 4 or greater stuff from Temur here. But this thing basically reduces your spells by 1 and then maybe helps a little bit more.
Yeah, the card is pretty good if you get into play. It's not the kind of card you really wanted in this format, which is to say like a mid-range, 4/3 for 3. Just like the Temur Tawny back also just ended up not being like a spectacular card.
No, but I was going to bring up the Tawny back also because I think it's just better than the Battlecrier. Like, it's a little easier to cast, and it's I don't know. I think if you were to put these 2 cards in front of me, most of the time I would just take the Tawny back. So when a common is even arguably better than a rare at the same cost, like that's probably not a great thing for the rare. Not that it's bad.
Yeah,
but it doesn't say
I
a lot.
think what's kind of interesting about that, I guess, is I think that I wouldn't really want to take either early. I would want to. In both cases, I would probably want to take them once I was more established. And if you know you're like straight teamer, then I think that the battle crier is going to end up being better most of the time.
Okay. Yeah, to be fair, I like the Tawny back. Like I played it fairly regularly. I thought it was fine. So maybe I'm just a little higher on it than you are in general.
I mean, I think it's fine too. It wasn't like a high priority for me.
Agreed. Our last of 3 rares. It's a sweet one. It's Fangkeeper's Familiar, the Sultai 3/3 with flash. And when it ETBs, you can counter a creature spell, destroy an enchantment, or gain 3 life and surveil 3, and hopefully block something and eat it.
Yeah, I'd be fine for picking that card.
That's what I would take. You are not going to make a world where I'm passing it. I would say, though, that if I had to kind of power rank how I pick stuff like in the Arena Open and things like that, the 2 cheap 3, the Grixis Exhales were basically top of my list because I felt that unless it was a top tier bomb, and I mean a proper bomb, like better than Fangkeeper's Familiar even, that those were actually the things that separated out my really good decks from my pretty good decks, were how many Caustic Exhales, Molten Exhales I had, and then to a lesser extent the Blue Exhale as well. Those to me seem to be the difference makers, because the truth is that, like, yes, there are better dragons, better 6-drops or whatever, but man, half the games I won is if I was able to have some removal to make sure that the red-white or red-white-black deck didn't kill me, and that I could manage my opponent's threats on some level. And then it could just be a stupid Durgar Island Dragon with a counter on it from a globe or something. Like, those finish games too, And then every once in a while, you just get some incredible bomb, 6, 7, 8 drop, whatever, that can just win you the game. But I found that winning the game, there was equity to be gained by getting those huge bombs, but there was much more equity for me in doing relevant things in the late game and being able to interact with my opponent. So it would be really close for me between Caustic Exile and Fangkeeper's Familiar. On a regular arena draft, I would just slam the Fangkeeper's Familiar because it's one of my favorite, and it is really powerful. I mean, make no mistake, that's a great card, and it's right in my wheelhouse for what colors I'm going to end up playing. But
yeah, I think that is, in this format, a card that costs 1 of 3 different colors, like a triple color card, is just pretty easy to cast, honestly.
It is.
Like, surprisingly easy. So
if you took the Familiar, like, is there a world? I mean, it'd be very rare that you weren't able to put that in your deck, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely end up in a spot where you didn't, but yeah, I would say that's not going to be the most common.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even fathom it, Luis. I can't even fathom it. I'm just playing the thing. Okay, let's get into the Sunset Show here. First up, if you could summarize the set in one sentence, what would it be?
Dual decks, 5-color dragons versus Boros. It really was just those 2 decks. It totally is.
Dragons versus knights or something. It's like, dude, that is exactly how it played out. I said ice cream, but for all the meals, because like this is in many ways a lot of what the style of Magic that I like to play, which are like long game decks, slow decks, controlling decks that want inevitability, fixing, all of these things that you have to manage. I really like that, but it kind of was the only deck I drafted besides the occasional Boros deck when I was just angry or whatever. But otherwise, man, I didn't draft anything else. Like I drafted the entire format end to end. All I really drafted was one archetype. Admittedly, it's a complicated and diverse archetype, but come on, like I drafted one deck for a whole format. I've never done that ever before. Like that's just wild.
I've had formats where did a lot of that, but it's very rare that I have a format where that's like the only thing I would do.
Just end to end. So I guess our next question is self-explanatory, but what turned out to be the best archetypes? The funny part about this, Luis, is that I could change the question to be what turned out to be the only archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could draft the different shards or whatever, and that was a thing you could do, or the clans. Sometimes you ended up with like a really clean Jeskai deck, and that was awesome.
Jeskai was the one that I thought of too.
Clean Sultai deck or whatever.
No.
But I think for the most part, you end up in a spot where once you were drafting a 3-color deck, you would just draft the 5-color deck, and then red-white. Yeah, you could definitely draft Mardu or Jeskai, but it was just red-white was the kind of the headliner there. Black-white not so much, and then certainly not red-black.
See, I had a little bit of a different view. If I was drafting a wedge that had green, it just ended up being 5 color. So if I was, teamer, it just ended up being 4 or 5 color. I'd go. Sometimes I would do like teamer with black or something like that, right? And if I was drafting Sultai, it was the same thing. I'd splash red and not play white. But most of the time, I just played 5 color if I was touching those. Exceptions, not to the green part, but the times when I would actually stick was, I don't know, maybe like twice I drafted Jeskai straight up and didn't splash around. And then the other one, as you said, is Mardu, which is interesting because it is so red-white dominated that it ended up being closer to red-white than red-white-black. It felt like I was splashing black in that deck rather than being full-on Mardu most of the time.
Yeah, I think that the lands you got dictated everything heavily, of course, as usual. But
is this the most narrow?
It's pretty close
because you can remember.
Another format that was also pretty narrow was Strixhaven.
Mm-hmm.
But even Strixhaven, there, I think like you ended up in a spot where there was still more than 2 decks, and this felt really close to a 2-deck format. Really, it's mostly the 5-color deck. Just it ate everything else, right?
Yeah.
Everything got consumed into the 5-color deck, and that was just too much to kind of just do over and over again, at least for me, even though I did like that sort of thing.
What was the best performing 3-color deck? It looks like it was straight Mardu.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because the best of the 3-color decks and other clans, like you mentioned, just ended up being 5 colors. So
right. Yeah, it
wasn't really so much like, oh yeah, there's going to be another, like there's a great teamer deck. It's like, well, if it was a good teamer deck, it's probably a good 5-color deck.
Yeah, and then also interesting, besides Mardu, the most drafted number of games deck was Jeskai. Yeah.
Again, going back to probably a lot of red-white splash a couple blue cards sort of decks.
Right, and no green to enable the, screw it, I'll just play everything decks. What cards were we most wrong about during the set review? What cards really surprised us one way or the other?
Well, first of all, the Dragonstorm Globe package ended up being truly excellent, and that was not as much on our radar.
Yeah, particularly just Dragonstorm Globe, right? Like that card to me is the centerpiece for that. I know the Forecaster was decent and the Boulderborn whatever was okay. But the Globe to me was like, that card was good.
I mean, usually 3-mana rocks aren't that good, which is kind of what we based our evaluation on. Mm-hmm. It turns out first of all, making it so that you didn't have to take as many lands, and the fact that 5 colors was such a good deck. Plus the +1/+1 counters when everyone's running a bunch of dragons, having your dragons be a little bigger than theirs, that added up. So definitely missed on that. The second one was a card I mentioned in the set review or earlier when I was in the Cracker Pack, which is like, we're like, Mardu Devotee, this looks a little low impact, but literally as we're saying it, I'm just thinking like, this is just going to be so good. Why am I saying this? It was like one of those things. I know you have this happen to you, Marshall, because you and I are pretty similar. It's like 11 p.m. You should go to bed. You're like, I have a half a pint of ice cream in the fridge downstairs. and you've been kind of thinking about it all night. And you go down and you're eating it. And you're just, as you're doing it, as you're like, at least for me, as I'm walking downstairs, as I'm opening the freezer, as I'm taking out the ice cream, I'm thinking like, I should not be doing this. I don't need to do this. Oh, and then I'm just like, well, And yet,
My mom gave me this box of these caramel things that she got at Costco. She's like, I got these for you. And I just bring that stuff to the office for the watch stuff and let them eat it. So I don't have it in the house. And just like literally last night, exactly that scenario. I'm just like, I'll just eat one of these.
Yeah. And with Mardu Devotee, it was like, I just literally felt at the time that we were going to regret this. And it wasn't a good decision to say this card was bad, because clearly these cards are always good.
Yeah.
And it's just, our lizard brain takes over and we're like, 1 mana, 1/2, not for me. And it's like, well, yeah, this is a good card still. And you know it. And it's like, I don't feel bad about missing on like Dragonstorm Globe, because it's like, sometimes you miss. And, historical data is kind of on our side there. But when it came to the Mardu Devotee, it was like, we know this is going to be good enough.
Just trust our gut, right?
Like, we don't need to do this. And it's just like, we did it anyway.
And now it's the best white common. So
yeah. So it was just kind of funny how that all worked, and it was just like, that's how it's going to be.
Yeah. That's how we are. You put down Rot Curse Rakshasa here as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, I thought. So this is the mythic, the 2 mana 5/5 trample with Decayed, and then you can exile it from your graveyard to Decayed their stuff. I think this card, there's a world where I think this card is good still. Like, it is a good card, and there's some formats where this card would be excellent. The biggest problem is black was just so not an aggro color, and aggro in general, I mean, it was good in red-white, but just they weren't going to be playing double black cards very often. So
yeah.
we looked at this card and we're like, this card's pretty good. And it's like, well, as it turns out, it's not really. Like, it just doesn't have the tools to be good. And there aren't enough decks where decaying 2 of their things was a big deal, either the Dragons decks. Like, they cared about losing a blocker, but they didn't really care about, like, having, like, their creatures only get to attack once. So overall, I think that, the Rot Curse Rakshasa, I stand by it being a good card, but it's just the pieces weren't there, and we ended up pretty far off as a result.
Yeah. What were some of the most underrated or overrated cards?
Well, certainly the Dragonstorm package, the Forecaster, the Globe, the Boulderborn Dragon, all that stuff. Aggressive Negotiation is kind of an interesting one. This is the look at their hand, make them discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on one of your things. In Sealed, I ended up basically always main decking this card.
I played a heck out of that card in Draft and Sealed, yeah.
And it ended up being, I think, pretty good overall, even though it doesn't look very good.
Yeah, this is just a classic case of a card that is, in a vacuum, not a very good card. In fact, it's quite bad. But in the format, especially with the way that the archetypes played out, this was important, right? This was a way to take away one of those expensive bombs that often decided a game. There were numerous of those actually in this set. We'll get to Prince and Pauper in just a bit, but you can kind of see where I'm going with it. There were actually a lot of cards that were game deciders, particularly rares and mythics that you would see. And if you had an answer for them, this is also why counterspells were so nice. You could win, think cards like Jeskai Revelation, Ugin, Eye of Storms, Meringue River Regent, Dragonback Assault, Ireni, right? Those are the top 5 cards in the format. And they're expensive / difficult to cast, some one or the other. And, if you were able to take those away preemptively, that's a big deal. Like, it really mattered, because drawing cards was not hard, but having good answers for those top end threats was, especially when many of them, if they hit the battlefield, like the damage was already done, right? Or if they resolved, the damage was already done.
Yeah. And being able to just preemptively take them is so incredible.
You put Dragonologist here. Did we not like it? Or what was the...
It on first blush looked okay and ended up just being incredibly good. So it's not so that we called the card bad, but we certainly didn't call the card like a near bomb, and it's closer to a bomb than not a bomb. So
it's a very good card.
It's just a very good card, yeah.
What were some of the most controversial cards?
Well, controversial is always funny. Like I say this every time we do the Sunset Show. This is like kind of a weird metric because there's not always like controversy about cards. But I think that the Obzon cards initially, when a new set comes out and you look at all this, you're like, all the clans are going to be good. well, we'll figure out how good each one is, and no reason to think one's worse or better than the others on first jump. Turns out Obzon was pretty bad. I had a little bit of success with some of the black-green decks, like occasionally, but the Obzon cards were bad, and I think a lot of people in the early drafts were taking them because, you open an Obzon rare or an Obzon uncommon, why would you think that would be a bad thing to take? But it turns out that they mostly didn't work all that well. And then the Globe package did take a little bit to land. It was actually kind of interesting. There's not that many times does something fly under the radar for any amount of time. And when I say an amount of time, I feel like the set came out on Tuesday, and by Thursday people had a decent idea, and then by like Sunday it was like everywhere because the BK won the Spotlight series, basically drafting that deck every time.
Right.
But it was like watching the ham on like Wednesday and Thursday, and he was onto it, and people were not onto it. And that is a little bit slower than it used to be. I remember the days when you could have a set come out and there's a Grand Prix 3 weeks later and you could unveil some tech where there was like whole archetypes people didn't know. That's just not the case anymore.
No, it's days now at the most, especially with that Spotlight coming so quickly right after it. Yeah, the controversial cards category, we could maybe rework it a little bit. It was mainly based on like Twitter conversations and stuff from back when people would actually post stuff on Twitter that was like interesting or relevant. And, people would get into arguments about, I think this is the best common. No, now it's just like crickets because I guess 17 lands plus Twitter's kind of drown out, meaningful conversation in many ways. What card had your favorite artwork?
So it's Corey Steel Cutter, which is, obviously that's a card you see a lot, which is nice because I actually really like the art. It's just this really cool looking sword thing on top of a scroll, and I think it like looks neat. And I'm not immune to the fact that I've been playing with the card a lot. I've been playing a lot of Prowess, and it's a good card. So when you play it, you get the the dopamine. You're like, yeah, this card is good, and you end up getting like a more of a good association with it. But yeah, I do like the Corey Steel Cutter. It's by Zabi Gaztilua, which is XABI. So apologies for butchering that, but very cool art.
That's very cool. Yeah, the one I picked was Teeming Dragonstorm by Leon Tucker, and this is I'm kind of a sucker for, like we always have the joke about Elmer the elk being like the scale elk. Normal artists use scale birds. They'll put little birds up on the horizon to kind of give you an idea for how big something is or what kind of view you're looking at. And in Magic, since they want to go really big, they'll do scale elk. This one has scale horses and scale dragons to show how big the impending storm is. And it's a striking card too. It's one of those ones that I think is really successful and making something that has some detail and some subtlety to it immediately grokkable, even on a tiny format like a Magic card and from a distance. So great job, Leon. I love that artwork. What are the best build-around cards in the set? And I think we should start with the Dragonstorm cycle because those were kind of the hit us on the head, build-arounds, the ones that were real easy to figure out.
On the card what you should be doing.
Right.
They're clearly a combo card. You play this and then you play a dragon, and that does count as a build around.
That's right.
Even if they've led us to the water, as it were.
Yeah. The order for me, my favorite was the blue one. I think that was the best one. And then white, the Teeming Dragonstorm I just mentioned, actually, because it did let you have a bit of inevitability, and 2/2/2s on the ground are good blockers if you're facing that relatively aggressive deck. And then the green one, which was fine. I mean, again, it's interesting because in this format, searching up 2 lands like that really was relevant. It could give you the mana you needed, both in amount and color, to cast the stuff in your hand and really turbo you out ahead of the other decks. But the reason it's number 3 here is because, again, there were so many different ways to fix your mana. You didn't need to prioritize a relatively clunky one like this. And then red was like kind of a pet card for me, but I didn't think it was that powerful because it could just hit a whole bunch of stuff that didn't matter. And then there was the black one, which I never actually played. And it was a disappointment for sure, because the other ones were good. Like they were interesting and had stuff going on. And then the black one was just kind of there. Would you flop any of those?
No, I mean, I think that blue and white were hands down the best.
Yeah.
And I think red and green were in like the second tier and the blacks in the third tier. That all lines up pretty much with how I would rate such things.
So my actual favorite build around in the set though was Glacierwood Siege. We drafted it in our draft walkthrough.
That was my answer too.
Yeah, nice.
Really fun card.
Super fun.
I like alternate win conditions. I mean, who doesn't really? And getting to like go around the kind of main axis of interaction is pretty cool. Like I found that to be pretty fun.
Yeah, and it really did change the way that the game played out, right? And especially if you were like harmonizing where you could cast multiple spells in one turn, that kind of stuff ended up being a really nice complement to that card. Question though, did you ever take the other mode, which lets you place land from your yard?
No, the Crucible Worlds mode, no.
I never did either.
BK did once, I think, when we were testing at our place, because I think there was one game where he like had milled 3 lands, and it was just like, yeah, this seems like it's worth playing.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, Glacierwood Siege ended up being my favorite build around. Which card still looks good when you read it, but just doesn't see play? And this is what I was alluding to from our Crack-A-Pack. The Rainveil Rejuvenator, like 4 mana, 2/4, taps for at least 2 mana in a slow format where you want to kind of have a blocker and do big stuff later. I'm like, what's not to love? And the card just for some reason stinks. I think not fixing your mana color-wise is a fairly big hit against it. You really do need your green spells that are attempting to do stuff with your mana to affect that part of it. And then also it fell in the murky middle, right? And this is the same thing for the green Dragonstorm, which is that, you did kind of want to be doing things on turns 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5-ish drops were kind of like a little bit less priority. And then it kind of picked back up again at the 6, 7, 8 range where you were kind of winning the game. So it might have fallen a little bit into that as well.
Yeah, it's funny because you would think that this would be a lot of what you would want, accelerating up to like 7s and stuff, but it just didn't really play out that way.
Didn't. Effortless Master we talked about before too. You have Constrictor Sage here.
Yeah, that's the 4/4 tapper for 5, and it just same like Effortless Master and the Rainveil Rejuvenator, cards that cost like 3 to 5 mana, 4 to 5 especially, that aren't dragon or dragon adjacent cards, just aren't that good. Like that's just not the format for them. And these cards look like pretty solid cards in most formats, and then it just didn't really work for me.
Yeah, Constrictor Sage was close enough to a Mana War that I played it more than I should have, but it was always mediocre. What about Channeled Dragonfire?
Yeah, that's another one that looked good, and I don't think was. I think Channeled Dragonfire was actually like not a great card especially in sealed is kind of where I'm going. But even in draft, I would usually main deck it, but side it out a lot. There's just a lot of matchups where they didn't have good X2s, even against Mardu sometimes. They're like on, just strike, shock troops or strike forces, and you're just sitting there kind of unable to really use your removal spell to kill something that you care about.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about a different card. My bad. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of
which card did you think?
I thought we were, maybe it's called Dragonfire or whatever, but the blue-red draw card.
Oh, Glacial Dragon Hunt?
Glacial Dragon Hunt.
That card also was a little bit worse than I thought. Funnily enough.
It just caught a stray.
Well, it was okay, but it looks like a premium uncommon, and you're like, yeah, I'm getting something out of this. I actually don't think that that's how that played out.
I agree that it went from, I thought it would be premium into not quite, but I still always played it. The Channeled Dragonfire was sometimes in, sometimes out for sure.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting one because it's a bit of a rarity. But was this a Prince or a Pauper set? And I'm saying Prince because even though, of course, definitely. the commons are what sets you up. I mean, the big hitters at the top of the percentage curve are all expensive, over the top, powerful bombs. It was not, and those in many ways dictated who won the game in these 5-color slugfests.
I mean, when you had a 5-color deck with no rares, you did not feel good about it.
No. No.
That's kind of a Prince format to me. Like,
Yeah.
you never want to end a draft with 0 rares because like the rares are really good in every format. But there's some formats where you tell me, hey, you've got no rares, but your deck's pretty good, and I'd be like, great, that sounds good. You can't have a pretty good 5-color deck without rares. You can have a good Mardu deck or a good red-white deck without rares. Mm-hmm. You can't have a good 5-color deck without rares. You can have an okay one. You can have like the best case scenario is you have like a bunch of blue Dragonstorms and Dispelling Exhales, so you can like beat their rares and have good card draw. But for the most part, like if you're sitting on 0 rares, like what are you're going to be playing Durgar Island Dragon, and then they're going to be playing Meringue River Region. That's kind of how it feels.
So there's top 25 cards. I'm just taking a quick look. One of them is uncommon.
Right.
All the rest are rare, mythic, rare. And of the top 10, mythic. So 6 of them are mythics. So yeah, Prince. What's the it's a bad card, but I love it anyway award winner for you?
For me, it was Right of Renewal. This is the you shuffle up to 4 cards back to your deck, and you get back 2 permanents. And I really wanted Right of Renewal to be good. Like, I thought that, in the 5-color decks, you could end up in a spot where you were like using this to make sure you don't deck, and it was just like, yeah, but in reality, it wasn't good.
It wasn't good.
The games really didn't come down to that. So it's kind of unfortunate because I was gearing up for these like 5-color attrition battles where someone got decked. It's like people really didn't get decked when there weren't either Glacierwood sieges around or there was just like a lot of, I mean, it did happen sometimes if both people had a lot of card draw and not enough finishers, but really, you didn't really need to do this. No.
The cool part was that you could put their cards back in. So like if they milled lands or something, you could shuffle lands in and be like, ha ha ha, you're going to draw these lands. That's how I'm winning this game. For me, it was Breaching Dragonstorm. Yeah, which I don't think is an actually good card. I think it's the red Dragonstorm.
I think it's not great. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's okay.
I know which one it was.
For the benefit of the audience. No,
Marshall thought I didn't know what the
No, I know was. You know what it does. Really. I did think it was playable and it was really fun. I mean, it's a really cool card for sure. But, this is a format where you did need to play a pretty significant number of reactionary spells. And one of the better ones was Dispelling Exhale. And that was not a fun card to hit with that. It's just a brick. There were definite upsides. I did routinely play the card. But if I'm being really honest with myself, there's so many cards at common and uncommon that would just straight up be better than that at any point, in the game that I'm probably lying to myself a little bit. What is the I literally never win with it, but it always seems to beat me card for you?
I've had multiple games that I've lost to the Black Dragonstorm, Corroding Dragonstorm, where it was like, it actually lost to the Dragonstorm, not they played Dragonstorms in a game they were winning, because that has happened. But
yeah,
a game where it's like, one of these even happened at the Spotlight, where it's like, I was playing against like a much better like Obzon 5-color deck, and I ended up in a spot where it was like, I'm barely going to like tempo them out. I think I might have enough to kill them. And it was just like, no, they're going to gain 2. And then they play another dragon and just like kind of added up to they had just enough life to not die. And it was just like, oh, come on.
That's brutal.
And that's where that deck kind of came to, like, that's how that would play out sometimes.
For me, it was Hollow Merc Siege, the green-black Siege. And I did play it a few times because it's a very, very powerful card, if set up properly. And I just felt like I never picked it as high as other people, so I got it infrequently. And then when I did, I would always be the one to draw it too late or not have it on 2 or not be able to like set up like some type of kind of recursion thing going with it where I'm like hitting you, backing it up with another creature ready to go. It always felt like my timing was off with it, but my opponents, it was not. I lost to that thing a lot. I mean, that's a very, very good card. And a really nice one for playing against 5-color deck because it basically just makes any one of your things, any surviving creature ends up being a threat. All right, what was my opponent played this and now I must win or quit Magic forever card?
For me, it was Nature's Rhythm. That's the green X, put a X cost creature into play and a green X. You can harmonize it. And it was just like a bad deal on both sides. Really just not a good card.
Man.
And I somehow played against 2 people who played this over the course of the format, and neither of them did win, which was nice.
That card's a total scam, right? And I mean, it's like you show up and you're like, okay, fine, I'll pay double green extra for this creature, and I get to go get it. Okay, cool. And then it's like Nature's Rhythm's like, we got one on the hook because you come back and you're like, I'll pay quadruple green now. It's like, come on. For me, it's Mox Jasper. Because the card was basically unplayable. It was just completely unplayable, but it looked sweet, right? Like I wouldn't blame somebody, especially a newer player, for being like, it's a Mox, I gotta play it, right? Or, first pick it because it looks cool, or it has the word Mox or something like that. And then, as the resident old guy drafter, if somebody plays that type of card, you're like, all right, my drafting card's on the table now because I can't let somebody beat me who plays Mox Jasper. What was the biggest Groan test? Maybe the overrun of the set, if you will.
For me, it was Jeskai Revelation. And not only because the card was just, nigh unbeatable, but also when your opponent started playing that on like Arena or Magic Online, it would be like, okay, they didn't do anything. I'm winning this game. They have nothing in their hand. You attack them, and then they're like, start choosing targets. You see an arena clicking targets.
Oh my god!
Or like on Moto, that sometimes they tap 7 mana and then start, and it's just like, oh my god, because you can't beat the card. Like the card is game over.
No, and for what it's worth, that was the number 1 win rate card in the whole set. So
yeah,
best card in the set. Yeah, for me, there was 2 that came to mind, but the one that really stood out more often was War Effort.
Yeah, War Effort is a beating when you've got the board for it.
Totally. And you don't need much. You need a couple of creatures and maybe one of them has mobilized and you're pretty much good to go. But I'll tell you, this is my real pick for this, is All Out Assault. Holy crap. This has that overrun vibe where you could think that you're even ahead in the game, let alone at parity, and that things are going okay. And then you're done. Like the game can end very, very quickly with an all out assault. I had a game. I would have put myself at 80% to win, maybe even higher, and lost that turn to all assault. I was like, okay, I think I'm okay still. And I'm doing math and I'm like, oh my God, I'm dead. Like I'm not okay at all. Like there's no matter how I block, I lose this game. It's like, wow. So that's the card. I hate that card. Like never want to see that thing again. What was the most frustrating bad card to lose to, or maybe a card that you won't miss playing against, or just maybe one that annoyed the crap out of you? For me, it was Wild Ride. Oh my God. Like, yeah,
that card, when that card worked, that card did some.
It is good at what it does. It's narrow, it's risky. Like there's a lot of bad things you can say about it, but when it does what it's supposed to do, it is one of the few cards that can pile on damage quicker. There's not many cards in the set that can pile on damage quicker than that. Particularly, when you're combining it with like some of the uncommons that are available, or some of the cards that have mobilize and stuff like that, where it's kind of sneakily adding even more damage than what it's just providing plus the creature. It's just like, oh my God. I mean, I've just taken huge hits off of that in the early stages. And it's another one of those cards that makes you think that you're probably doing okay and then tells you, well, actually, no, you're not. But also, if you have a removal spell up for it, then they either can't or don't cast it, or if they do, they lose the game on the spot, more or less. So it is a very risky card, to play.
Yeah, I think for me, it was Obzon Devotee, which is kind of a funny one to mention. But the reason is, I just thought the card was quite bad. And you would sometimes play a game where they would just have enough stuff in play that, the game was long enough that they maybe bring it back a few times or whatever.
Yeah. What was the bombiest bomb, the card you hoping to open pack one, pick one, or in your sealed pool? For me, it was Ugin.
Yeah, Ugin or Jeskai Revelation.
Yeah, I know Jeskai Revelation is technically a better card, but come on, colorless Ugin for, I'll give up a little bit of win equity there just to be able to cast that every single time and to absolutely know that it's going in my deck 100% of the time when I open it. I'm in for Ugin pack one, pick one over everything else.
Yeah, I mean that is reasonable. It's a very good card. I wouldn't complain about either one, let's just say.
That's for sure.
I think Jeskai Revelation is just an unbeatable card.
That's just a savage card. Another one that's on this list for me, again, I mentioned it earlier because it eluded me, was Ireni, the Song Unending. And by the way, that one definitely has a place in the Groan test as well. That is 100% a card that you could be at parity or think you're doing fine, or even you think you're ahead, and then the game is over and you don't have an answer for it. And even if you did, you just lost your board, right? That card matched up so well with this format. That the games tended to go long, they were slow, they had built out boards, and all of a sudden your board is completely gone and you're dead to the Ireni. And it's it's hard to kill, right? The tools that you have in the colors that can actually touch it don't do a good job of killing huge creatures like that. So even if you manage to put together some combination of things to kill it, all that meant was that you were going to lose to the other stuff they had because your board was gone.
I mean, how many spells in the format could kill it? Like Sarkhan's Resolve and a Piercing Exhale or a Knockout Blow if you had a Death Toucher, but past that, it's not a whole lot.
I mean, there ain't much. How many Molten Exhales do you need to?
I guess 3, sure.
Yeah, just triple up on that. It's just not a thing. And yeah, that card definitely deserves a spot on there. Wow, this was an all-time Groan test format.
I view the big cards. I mean, there's a lot of cards with high win rates, but Ugin, Jeskai Revelation, Ireni, Meringue River Regent, those are the cards that were just
the hammers.
Yeah, you're not beating any of these cards really.
That's right. If we go down to the lower rarities, though, we have what's the best common for each color. White. Yeah, it was Mardo Devotee, although the Salt Road Pack Beast was right up there too.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why we gave it a bad rating. It's really a mystery.
the Salty Snack Beast. Blue, Sib Sig Appraiser for sure. That was the best blue common in my mind. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's not too close. Though I do think
the Exhale was good.
The Exhale was very good.
It was very good. Dispelling Exhale there. Black Caustic Exhale. Right?
Yeah, I mean, all the Exhales were incredible.
Yeah, but I don't know. To me, black was that was definitely the one. Same thing with red, Molten Exhale. Those were just unbelievably good removal spells. Super efficient. For me, the red one was the best of the bunch. That 4, getting up to 4 was a big deal.
Yeah. The other thing is red was typically a little bit easier of a color to have access to rather than black. Yeah. I mean, you're playing 5 colors. You can play both, but you were more teamer based than you were black, whatever. Sometimes you were Sultai, sure. But overall, I feel like having access to red mana tended to be a little bit easier.
And then for green, I had Einok Wayfarer. I like that card and Sagu Wildling as my 2 best greens, though I did look it up just to see what 17 Lands had to say. And it does have Piercing Exhale as number 1 by a little bit, not a big margin. I'm curious what
decks were using that, because that's not, I feel like that's.
Yeah. I wasn't playing them.
Yeah.
Maybe I was down on that card a little bit too much, but I like the Wildling and the Wayfarer way better than those. What was a mythic uncommon for this set? I looked and I'm there isn't one that jumps out to me. I think that it might be because there are so many gold uncommons and powerful gold uncommons that maybe it drowned it out. If I looked up the highest win rate just to see what that said, and it was Sonic Shrieker by a fair bit. So I guess we would give it to that. But for me, it being the mythic uncommon isn't just the best or the highest win rate. It's the one that stands out in that way. And I didn't really have a strong one. Did you?
Yeah, I don't think I had one. There's a lot of really good ones. Like the blue Dragonstorm was excellent. I'd be pretty happy taking that, you know?
For sure. Yeah, I think that when you have so many amazing uncommons, it can be sometimes difficult for one to stand out. And if you're going to get to mythic uncommon, like, you know, you got to be special. What was the worst card in the set? The biggest blank, the most last picked? I picked the Sib-Sig Ceremony because it has this really interesting combination of being basically impossible to cast. It costs triple black. It somehow gets worse the longer because you're not using its ability as it's not on the battlefield. So over time, it actually gets punished for not being castable in that way. And what it does is it takes my really sweet gold cards that I've put all this mana together or whatever it is, and it downgrades them into two zombies. I'm like, how could you possibly make a worse magic card than this? So that the Sib-Sig Ceremony took the award for me.
There was one card which that combined with it, the 3/1 that you could play it out of your graveyard. Or you could get it back from your graveyard. So if you have Sib-Sig Ceremony on that, you would play that, get a zombie, play another creature, it blows up, gives you a zombie, and then you get that back, and you just like can kind of go off. And they're cheaper because it only costs 1 to cast the creature. But past that,
black-white combo deck. Yeah,
I think Sib-Sig Ceremony has to be the answer. It's just like a card that it has the dubious distinction of if you chose to put this card into play, you would probably, like if you got it for free in play, you would be way worse off.
Definitely.
And that's a tough one because that's like,
well, right. So like you say that, like if it was free, you would be worse off, and it costs triple black. Like it's actually very difficult to cast. So there you go. Okay, Luis, no pressure, but what card was the most begrudgingly playable?
The most begrudgingly playable. There was a bunch of cards like this, but I think probably the Meticulous Artisan, the
which one is that?
that makes a treasure.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
If your mana wasn't good enough, then this card is what you needed to use. You know.
Yes, and people did. It actually crossed that threshold. Oh man, I always feel so bad for the card that gets begrudgingly. It's like, thanks guys, you know, like I'll take my award home now for being like almost okay. Is there a card that you will miss drafting? For me, Glacierwood Siege, we talked about it being our favorite build around and being one of the cards that made the format kind of more interesting. But also, you know, like I like me a good old Frontier Bivouac. You know, I'll just miss drafting cards like that. Even though we were talking about how you don't have to like super prioritize fixing your lands in certain ways in this set, I do like playing those type of cards. What about you? Anything you'll miss?
I think Roiling Dragonstorm. I really had a good time when you were like, turn 2, Roiling Dragonstorm. Turn 3, kill your guy. Turn 4, kill your guy. Turn 5, Dragon. Pick up Dragonstorm. Like that. Yeah. That is good times. I enjoy doing that.
What was the LSVEist card and the Martialist card? For me, I'm going old school here, but it was, and I loved it. It was Ice Ridge Serpent, the 3/3 that bounced something.
That's perfect because it had all the mana war goodness, but was also mediocre. It's just things you love.
It really lined up perfectly for
Expensive
me.
And clunky.
Yes, I also really liked that it was a decent blocker. I'm a sucker for a mana war, and I did legitimately play a hell of a lot of Ice Ridge Serpent. What about for you?
For me, it was Rakshas's Bargain for sure.
Yes.
It hits all the notes. Lots of colors. You see lots of cards. It's an instant. You get to keep your mana up. You get to get card advantage, not just digging. And the most LSV's thing of them all is if I decked myself in this format, it almost assuredly meant I had 2 or 3 of these in my deck. That happened multiple times where I would just cast my second Rakshas's Bargain and be like, oh, this is going to be close to decking. Then I'm like, well, I guess I got to cast my third one because I need to find a way to kill them. And then you just didn't always get there.
Yeah. You know, to me, I always picture you playing this format and playing like turn 3 Sib-Sig Appraiser and seeing a Rakshas's Bargain and being like, okay, well, hang on for the ride because we're going to be halfway through our deck really quickly. And, but doing it anyway, because, you know, play one way. What was Marshall's soapboxiest card? I don't think I had one. I don't remember one that I was really fired up about. But
Yeah.
I will say something that came up kind of over and over again were the tri-lands and the gain lands, particularly gain lands at common. Just because the fixing ended up being easier and easier, and it was so ubiquitous that even those classic versions of mana fixing, generally speaking, lands like that, tri-lands and good duels are like the baseline. Those are the ones you want, and then you'll play spells and other things to augment it. But I just kept on going down and down and down on them because they were readily available. I never really felt that much pressure to get them, and there were so many other forms of fixing that even if I didn't, it was fine. But I don't know, it didn't really make me mad or anything. What card do you still have to read when it's cast against you?
I barely even know the name. It was the Mardu Dragon that makes it like, I guess, deal double damage if you have haste. But I'm like, oh, is it?
Which one?
There we go. The Mythic Mardu Dragon, the 4/5 flyer. I can find it. I'm right there.
Yeah,
but
you have to find it for me.
And Nariv, Heart of the Storm. It's 1 and plus Mardu mana for a 4/5 flying. And if it's a creature you enter this turn will deal damage, deals twice that much damage. It's like, is it a creature that, enter this turn? Is it double its power? Oh, it deals twice as much damage. It's not just combat damage. It's just weird stuff. But New Way Forward is another one too. That's a very confusing card. That's the Jeskai trick that prevented damage and drew you a bunch of cards.
Yeah, and it domed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I put, funny enough, I put All Out Assault, which in many ways, it didn't matter, because it was like,
because if they cast it in a good spot, you were probably dead.
You're dead anyway. But it does have some baffling text on it, right? When this enchantment enters, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase, followed by an additional main phase. When you next attack this turn, untap each. It's just like, I think I get what they're trying to say, but boy, that's a long way to get that across. Okay, big questions here, Luis. Zooming out. From a design and development aspect, how did this set fare? How are the mechanics? What were some of the wins and the losses for the format? The mechanics, by the way, were Endure, Flurry, Renew, Mobilize, Harmonize, and then they had the Omens on the dragons, and then I guess we'll call it a mechanic, but they had Behold as well. So
overall, I actually think the mechanics were pretty good. Endure ended up being weak, but the mechanic isn't intrinsically bad. You either get a token or a +1/+1 counter, and most of the time you want to make a token, so it's like a little bit lopsided, but that's fine. It doesn't. A mechanic like that, where it's like 80-20, you make a token versus get a counter on the creature, is still very plausible mechanic. As it turned out, the odds on cards overall weren't good enough, and that's fine, but I don't think that's really Endure's fault specifically. Flurry is pretty cool. It feels very Jeskai. Having spells matter is like an enduring mechanic in Magic, and there's a reason to keep going back to that well, but you still have like some pressure to like make it a little different. Like, let's just not do a bunch of, like, the first time cons showed up, they just put prowess on a bunch of creatures. That was like the first time prowess was there, and that's cool. That's a new thing. That's enough. You can't do that now. It's 10 years later. So Flurry was a cool way to like breathe a little new life into spells mattering, where it's like, your second spell. And it wasn't just when you play your second spell, do X. It was cards like Focus the Mind or, Rally the Monastery that are like, as your second spell, this is now cheaper. And that's pretty cool. So I like Flurry. Renew, the Sultai mechanic, it was just okay. Exiling from a graveyard for counters is fine, but it's not that exciting. Like Scavenge, for example, is kind of the same thing. And yes, there were some abilities here, and some of the cards were kind of interesting, but mostly they were forgettable. Mobilize, great Mardu mechanic, very flavorfully Mardu, played out pretty well, very aggressive, but also you can just like, if you don't have good ways to push it through or kind of optimize the tokens, they'll just do a bunch of blocks, and that's, you're not getting that much damage through. And Harmonize, again, a bit of a like amalgam retread of like Flashback plus Convoke, but played out fine. Overall, the mechanics I think were solid. Like the average mechanic grade is probably like a B. I don't think any of these mechanics like knocked my socks off, but they were all totally fine. Omens, I have less positive things to say. I think it was twofold. One, having the templating, just like the layout of the card, look like adventure, meant most experienced players were initially quite disappointed by these cards, just because you think, ooh, I'm going to go get a land and then later play a 3/3 flyer with like Saga Wildling. It's like, no. You're going to get a land, and if you redraw it, you can play a 3/3 flyer. It's like, oh. So that's less powerful, and that's fine. It's not like they had to be more powerful. But the biggest problem was just constant shuffling. And in paper, I played a paper tournament of this set. A lot of shuffling, not that fun. And even online, it's like you play Arena. I'm sure this happened to you. You go get an AP from the fridge after passing the turn. You come back and like one of your creatures is gone, and you're like, huh? Because it'll reveal the Omen card, but like
Totally.
at some point in time, it closes a window, and you're just like trying to reconstruct what happened. It's like, what is going on here? So I thought Omen was in some ways okay, but overall, like I think below the bar. And Behold. Yeah, Behold was totally fine. I would imagine we'll see Behold again. But overall, I think the bigger picture here is a draft format fun when there's 2 decks? And the answer is yes, but not for that long. I checked out of this format earlier than I would have expected after the first week, because the first week it was like, this is amazing. We get to draft 5 color, tons of card draw, tons of fixing, tons of dragons. This is so cool. But then it was like, oh, that's all this format is. Like original Khan's an all-timer. Each of the clans was really fun to draft, and there was a 5-color deck. Mm-hmm. But this format, it's like there was a 5-color deck and there was a red-white deck. So I think that there is some danger in having too much fixing, too many dragon payoffs and reasons to play all the dragon. But honestly, I think mostly it's the fixing. If the fixing was a little worse, you just wouldn't get to play 5 colors, not for free, but like without having too much fear of it not working out. There are some formats where you'd sometimes draft a 3-color deck and you're like, if I try really hard and I pick up like 5 duels or 6 duels, I can play a 3-color deck. This format, literally you could go first pick Jeskai Revelation, second pick Death Begets Life, the Sultai Wrath, third pick, Caustic XL, fourth pick Dispelling XL, fifth pick Static Field or whatever, the Oblivion Ring. You have no lands, you have 5 colors of cards. Do you have any kind of concerned that you're not going to get to cast all these cards?
In fact, I'm just excited by that start.
And then you see, and here at this point, you would probably take the Tri-Land over the Molten Exile, but
right.
Early on, you're probably taking Molten Exile over Tri-Land, which you would never do in most of the Tri-Land formats. So a little bit too much fixing leads to a little bit too little diversity when it comes to decks to draft, and I think that did end up costing the format some, but I want to be really clear. The way most people engage with Magic, this is probably even a better way to do it. Like having a format that's really fun the first 5 times and then tapers off pretty quickly, that's actually pretty good at meeting the goals of Magic, I would say. So I don't think that's even necessarily something that Wizards is going to like consider not being good. Like they won't, they're not going to look at that and be like, oh, that's a problem.
Yeah. Do you think that this did meet that bar? Like I remember the first few drafts I did, and it's hard to figure out a 5-color format in a few drafts. Like I didn't feel comfortable. Maybe I put together something playable, but I felt a little bit misled, right? Like we have learned to trust the signposts and to kind of pick up on what Wizards is telling us from a design standpoint when we do the set reviews. It's like, okay, I get it. And in this type of set, what we're supposed to be doing is drafting 3-color decks. That's what these sets are for. They're wedges. They're built around them. They have names. They have identities. They have mechanics assigned to them. And that isn't what happened. Now, I'm not saying that I don't mind that, but I wouldn't assume, especially if I was a more casual drafter, that I would have been able to sort that out in just a couple of drafts, Yeah,
I think that there is, it is a relevant point that drafting a 5-color deck can be hard, and maybe this was a good entry to that, because I think that this set was probably a little bit easier to draft 5 colors than most sets, just because
it was so
forgiving. It was hard to not get enough fixing or enough and if you took all the dragons, you were in pretty good shape. If you take all the dragons and all the cards that say dragon, like Exhales and Dragonstorms and Dragonstorm Globes, I mean, that's a very good deck right there.
Yeah.
You need to look further. So I see the reason to have a format like this. And obviously, I don't think it was... When a format plays out like this, you can't look at it and be like, well, they planned this out and this is how they saw it going. I've made a lot of different sets of card games. You do your best. You try to make sure things are fun and all the clans are, or shards or wedges or whatever are getting there to some degree. But it's really hard to predict how things are actually going to play out. So
Yeah.
I think they tried to make the most fun experience, and this is where we ended up, and it's pretty good. Like
Yeah.
going into the, when we go to the grades, I'm going to give this a higher grade than you. I can already tell.
Yeah, you probably are. I mean, I view this set as a fairly big miss. It's interesting from a personal perspective because it kind of missed in my direction. Like, I like this type of stuff. So I drafted this format end to end and did the arena open. But I will say that I would assume, I don't count, but I think my number of drafts is lower than normal. But I didn't give up on it quite, but I was closer to this than anything. And I'm definitely ready to move on to the next set, where with sets that I really enjoy, that's not the case. I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want to see this one go yet. I still have things I want to try. This one, I'm like, I get it. You check the box, and I don't want to, I don't want to give it points just because it happened to go in the direction that I personally like, right? Like if I was a person that liked a more on the ground, Bloomborough style format or something, like I'd be really bummed with this one. I mean, I would be drafting the red white deck the whole time and maybe even smashing people like me who are playing all these tap lands and stuff. But, even that would get old. But I think for me, the biggest picture miss aren't on the mechanic level. I agree with everything you said. I thought the mechanics were generally,
they're all fine,
safe, but good. They weren't like, wow, but it was like, nice. That's a cool implementation of that. Or that's an interesting combo. It was just the fact that we don't get 3-color sets very often. And when we do, I really want them to stick the landing on getting through the identity and feel of each of the wedges, because they're really cool design space that we don't get to dabble in much in draft. It's normally just 2-color stuff. And these are really interesting spots. And I felt like they just got washed away by all of the fixing. It's just, like I said, only a couple of times in the whole format that I actually draft a straight up 3-color deck. And that to me is a miss. It's just this whole format worth of interesting synergies and things like that just kind of got overwhelmed. It's the reverse of what I had talked about before with some of the more aggressive formats that we've seen, where there's this interesting middle ground, with these mid-range archetypes that get kind of ran over by the quick decks that just put stuff on the board a lot faster. And this was a similar effect just from the other end of the spectrum, where there was a lot of middle ground with these archetypes that might have been kind of cool. And instead they kind of got reduced into individual cards based solely on their power level, because anybody that could cast them, which was most people, would have just taken them and played them. So I knock it pretty hard for that. Lack of diversity of archetypes is a big hit, I think. And then also just kind of missing the opportunity on a 3-color set that we don't get too often is a big one for me too. What did the format teach you? Did it make you better at limited in any way, or were there any takeaways for you?
I think for me, the biggest thing was like, you actually can downgrade lands in your pick order, which especially after coming from drafting mostly cube is like, you third pick a Flooded Strand, you're feeling pretty good in cube. So it was interesting. That was like a big step where it's like, okay, you actually can end up dialing back your pick order on lands. But other than that, it was, it was interesting that counter spells are a little bit better in this format than most, just because Dispelling Exile is a really pushed card and there's a lot of expensive cards. But yeah, for the most part, I don't think this format was like the deepest in that regard.
Yeah, I felt similarly. I mean, this is something I kind of already knew, but it reinforced it, which was just that, too much of a good thing. Because again, to me, drafting interesting, complex 5-color decks like this is a good thing. I really enjoy it. But it does mean that it doesn't last as long. It's just, it gets a little stale when there's kind of nowhere else to go. Like, you're just not incentivized to gear down and play 3-color decks. If we lived in a world where, and by the way, that is normally the case. We talked about it last week on our Level Up episode about, not splashing as much, right? You're usually incentivized to stick to the baseline, and you actually ended up getting a long-term benefit from doing so. But here, it really didn't feel like that was the case. It wasn't like good for you. You stuck just to Sultai, really like that discipline's going to pay off in the draft when you get to cast all your spells. And then your opponent was like, haha, I didn't even prioritize mana fixing and I'm on 5 colors and I get to cast all my spells. It was like, oh, I'm just going to do that then. And again, I kind of knew that already going in, but it did feel like a little bit too much of the ice cream for dinner kind of thing. With that in mind, what grade did you want to give the set?
I would give it a B. I think it was pretty good. Like, it was solid. It wasn't certainly an all-timer, but I really try to think of, like, did I have a good time playing it? Yes. Did it last a long time? No, but I would rather take a good time than a long time. And, there's some sets where I didn't have either of those things. So I think overall, like, it was pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah, I gave it a C. I feel like a C has like a really negative connotation to it. Like, oh, like I'm slamming it or something. Not really. I just think it's like at best average. Trying to, again, I'm trying to filter a little bit because, again, I actually did enjoy drafting this deck. And actually, that's funny. I misspoke and said this deck, but it's actually true. I did enjoy drafting this archetype over and over and over again because it's what I like to do. So that kept me interested. But I am thinking about people that maybe don't approach it the same way that I do. And for what I said before, where they put all this effort into these different wedges, these 3-color combinations, even to the extent of giving them names, right? Like, oh, hey, I get to play an Obzon deck again, or, that type of thing. And to have all of that just muddied. What did you say last week? If you take all the beautiful colors and put them together, you get brown or something?
Yep, that is true.
A little bit brown here.
Yeah, and I will say that a pretty big knock against it is when you have a normal set and there's 10 color pairs, you don't expect to get there on all 10. And if you get there on like 6, you're happy. If you get there on 7 or 8, great. If you get there on like 9 or 10, amazing, right? In terms of, and when I say get there, I don't mean like they're all equally good, but like if, 100 drafts, how often would you end up drafting this archetype?
Right.
And if the answer for some of them is like 0 to 2 or something, or 0 to 5, then yeah, that's not great. There's only 5 clans, and these got hit pretty hard.
Well, it's interesting because if we broke down, like, if I presented you 7 archetypes, the 5 clans plus 5 color and red, white, somehow the 5 clans are the least. Like, the things that got drafted the most, I think, were not clans at all.
Yeah, well, that is another issue. That is also true. Weird. Like the 5-color deck not getting there is true, or getting there so hard that the clans didn't matter. That's definitely part of it. But even setting that part aside, the fact that Obzon, I think, was just so much worse than everything else meant that's a bummer. Like you would hope that would come out in testing, and you would maybe be able to do a little bit better there. But I mean, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. And I have a lot of empathy for not necessarily landing exactly where you want on it. But yeah, it's tough.
It is. And like I said, I did end up drafting it from end to end. So, that also kind of speaks for itself. What was your favorite card in the format to finish up?
Sorry, what?
What was your favorite card in the format?
I think Glacierwood Siege. It just...
Yeah.
It's the same reason I value like a Lurrus, like in Ikoria, Lurrus was like one of my favorite cards, maybe my literal favorite card. Or in March of the Machines when it came back in the bonus sheet. A card that when I pick it makes the entire rest of my draft very different than normal. That I really value cards like that. I think that's one of the best places to gain edge in a format, both as a creator of a format where it's like, oh, I put in this card and it spawns a new archetype single-handedly, Burning Vengeance, for example, an original Innistrad, any number of cards like that. And as a player, once you figure out how to do it, it can also be really fun. So I think that Glacierwood Siege was a really good time for that.
Build-arounds are the secret to a great longer format for sure. I decided to go a little more artisanal with my pick. I kept it simple, Luis. I went with Sagu Wildling, which I thought was one of the most elegant designs. It fit into the format more or less perfectly. And I think it really showed off templating aside that Omen was, powerful and that they could set those, they had so much freedom with the Omen side versus the Dragon side that they could really kind of stick the landing on just an awesome common like Sagu Wildling. So I went with that one. But I will tell you that I do agree with you. The card that I got most excited to open in the late part of the format, Glacierwood Siege. It was the one that stood out that was a game changer. All right, that's going to do it. We say goodbye to the Dragons and Tarkir for now. Although, if we see the pattern that they've been on, they have been going back to these planes, the popular ones, over and over again. So we'll probably get another shot at Tarkir one day. And I look forward to it too. This did not sour me in any way on Tarkir and all that type of stuff. I thought that that part is almost like I wanted more, so maybe we'll get that again someday. That's going to do it for this one. We're going to be transitioning over to Final Fantasy, apparently.
Final Fantasy. I'm sure one of your favorite franchises.
So we went from Tarkir, actually one of my favorite franchises, to somehow an IP that, has nothing to do with Magic, but will shortly. And whatever. I mean, to me, I played a little bit of Final Fantasy when I was younger and stuff, but I don't have any big affinity for it. I don't really care that much though. Like if the cards are awesome and interesting, I'm fine with it. I think if I had to vote, I would prefer that they didn't do that. And then they kept to stuff like this, the more Magic centric, either the stuff that they came up with themselves or core fantasy stuff, just because I like the consistency of it. But at the end of the day, if they make interesting draft formats, I don't really care what's on the cards. Like I'll be fine with that. It would feel weird though to commentate a pro tour with some of the IPs that they have coming up, but it is what it is. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV pretty much everywhere. You can find everything related to the show at lrcast.com and including Luis's YouTube channel on the front page, for example. Make sure you check out his awesome cube content over there, daily drafts with Luis. You will be entertained and you will also learn. I guarantee it. If you are looking to get better at cube, you can watch one of the best cube players in the world play every single day. That's a pretty good way to get better, I think. We want to thank our supporters over at Patreon and Ultimate Guard for their sponsorship of the show as well. And with that, we'll see you next week.
So I had a funny interaction on Magic Online today. I played against a fine, upstanding player by the name of Magic Devil 666.
Okay.
And I played against Magic Devil before. In fact, I played against Magic Devil a lot of times. And the reason is they've been playing since 2006 or something.
Oh, wow.
And, and so I play them. I'm playing Blue-Red Prowess. They're playing this like really atrocious looking mono blue Tron deck. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to read you our chat log.
Oh, no. Is this work safe?
It is, but it is funny. Magic Devil, nice luck draws. and I said, are they? And they said, yeah, only luck draws you have. Obviously, you with just a U, not spelling it out.
Right. The most annoying
And I
way.
said, not really my fault you played an unplayable deck. And because, look, you know this about me. The viewers probably know this about me. I never go there and start talking shit to my opponents. Right?
Literally
I'm not going to
0% of the time. Yeah.
But if they start it, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the equivalent of the guy who like has trained for martial arts 20 years and is just waiting for someone to try to mug him, and then no one ever does. But though I think actual people who train martial arts at that point are enlightened enough to know that they don't want to get in a fight. But in any case, I said, that's, not really my fault you played an unplayable deck. And that's why I have more trophies than you, right? And I said, lol. They're like, lol, what? And I was like, you want to compare achievements? Good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah.
And he's like, like, if that's what you want, sure. And he's like, you can accept the truth. You have no idea about Modern. Your time is long over. And I'm like, well,
he called you washed up? Come on.
He's not entirely wrong. But I was like, all right, just sign the slip, man. Because, he was dead. And then he runs, I'm a PT champion. You can't compete with me. 0 trophies I see now you have. That's massive with all-in luck deck. I'm just like,
wow.
GG, better luck next time, amigo. And he's like, you happy you had your one-time luck with your blue-red pile. Now you finished the league 2-3. I went 4-1, I'll have you know. But it led to a pretty good tweet, which is, in the style of Watchmen. It's 2009. I play against Magic Devil 666 on MTGO. They lose and fill the chat with complaints. It's 2014. I play against Magic Devil 666 on MTGO. They lose and fill the chat with complaints. It's 2025. Like,
Yeah,
and you can actually check that out on Twitter. And then some guy on Twitter starts arguing with me about how, well, I acted poorly and I don't need to put myself above other people. And I'm like, this is weird. Why are you defending this guy? And then someone messages me who knows Magic Devil in person. I was like, yeah, that guy arguing with me on Twitter is Magic Devil. He's pretending not to be.
He's got a burner account?
An outraged observer. Well, kind of a burner account, except it's apparently his actual name, but whatever. It's,
oh no.
Unwise, I would say. But I found the whole thing so funny because, like, when people get agitated and start being unsporting, and I just think it's funny because it's like, you're being unreasonable, so I don't really feel any compulsion to, like, make this go easier, or like, I don't really need to be nice here. Like, I'm not going to fly off the handle and start like yelling profanity at them, but it's like, I'm going to have a little fun with it. Cause it's like, you're getting mad. We just played a normal match of Magic. It was nothing really weird happened. I played the prowess deck. It did what it does basically all the time. It's a deck with 4 baubles, 4 preordained, 4 expressive iteration, 4 Dragon's Rage Channeler. It really does the same thing every time. That's all the deck does. And this guy's like flipping out about how lucky I got. It's like, well, I didn't really get lucky. I just did the thing the deck does. You chose to play a deck that really isn't good. And I just find it funny. And normally I wouldn't even post this on Twitter, but literally this is probably the 15th interaction I've had with this guy that has gone this way. Because I played against him like 15 times. It's happened every time over 15 more plus years. At that point, it's like, okay, clearly that's all you do. And then the comments are filled with people with their own screenshots of this dude just going off. And honestly, I probably am going to report him to Magic Online and be like, look, every time this guy plays, he's mean, just completely, unplayable to his opponents. He maybe just probably better for everyone, including this guy, that he doesn't play Magic anymore. But I found the whole thing very funny, up to and including someone who knows him being like, yo, that's his burner account. So it's like
incredible.
Look, it's okay to get frustrated when you lose, and it's okay to vent to your friends or whatever. It's not really okay to be yelling at your opponents about how lucky they are. That's just stupid. Like, it's just low intelligence behavior. Like, don't do that. You're just getting worked up. You're trying to make someone else feel bad because you lost a game of Magic. Like, really pathetic stuff. So I don't know. I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. And at the end of the day,
Godspeed,
people are going to do what they're going to do. But, this is his hobby, I guess.